Everybody joining me right now on the show. We're going to talk Kentucky football and basketball. Actually, basketball first, but joining me is Aaron Gershon. You check him out over at TheCatsPause247, part of 247Sports, and also the Bleav in Kentucky podcast. Aaron, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Appreciate having me. Not a problem at all.
Yeah, it's kind of was an interesting weekend for everybody there in Kentucky. Had the new basketball coach coming in, which has been interesting with that whole situation with Calipari exiting Lexington. And then also the football had the spring game, which if you couldn't watch it. So Aaron is going to describe what the spring football game was all about. But still a busy weekend there in Lexington this weekend.
Wild weekend. Wild 7-8 days, whatever it's been now. There's definitely been times where I've lost track of the days. It started obviously Sunday night when there were some real rumblings that John Calipari might be leaving for Arkansas, and then that turned out to be true. And then, you go through a quick coaching search and, like you said, a spring game on top of that. And you also don't want to overshadow what the baseball program's doing. Ranked 6th in the country, gets a sweep at Auburn. So it has just been a nonstop cycle of action in Lexington this last week, 8 days, during what's normally a pretty tame, quiet period outside of just the normal stuff. So just a crazy cycle here, but there's been plenty to talk about and a lot of cool stuff going on at the same time.
Yeah, so let's get into the Calipari leaving Kentucky part. I think there's a lot of people maybe not as plugged in on what's going on in Kentucky. I know I post on my Facebook page, hey, he's going to Arkansas. People said, why would he leave? That's shocking. For people who already know, I mean, I felt like I have an idea a little bit, not as much as you, obviously. It seemed like both of them, it was probably one of them separations that was good for both sides. But what led up to Calipari leaving Kentucky and going to Arkansas?
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment that it was good for both sides. But basically, the last 4 years, it's just not been Kentucky good, right? It hasn't even really been great. You have the 9-16 season during the COVID year. A lot of people just blew it off like, hey, it's a one-off. The next year, you have a really good regular season, and then you flame out and lose to St. Peter's. Again, he was given some benefit of the doubt, just given that he had never lost in the first round before, but then, kind of a mediocre year the next year, despite the fact you get Oscar Tshiebwe back. And then this year, again, the thing with this year, and it kind of felt like a last opportunity thing, was he went back to how his really good teams early in his tenure were, which was super young, super athletic. And, he was hoping that strategy, just being super young and having all the talent in the world, would be enough to get the job done. And they run into an Oakland team that has a ton of experience and they lose. And not to mention the SEC tournament, which, doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, look at, Auburn, they win the SEC tournament, go one and done in the NCAA, and there are countless other examples of that. But it means a lot to the fans because Kentucky fans pour into Nashville and take that place over. And Kentucky has won one SEC tournament game the last 3 years, and that's not acceptable here. So a lot of things where the fan base was already on edge and kind of just ready to do something new. And, this time, I guess it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, it comes out that Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director, is not going to make a change and they're going to run it back. And for 2 weeks, everyone's, I wouldn't say, they were ready to support the team. I don't think anyone was necessarily feeling good about it or happy, but they were just ready to kind of see what roster pieces get put together and see what happens. And then Sunday night, man, it all changes and a totally changing trajectory. But going back to the first point, I do think this was something that will be beneficial for both sides. I just think it was a stale product here. The fans were on edge, the toxicity in the fan base, just knowing there was half the fan base really loved Cal and supported him. The other half was done with him, and they were always going at each other's necks. That part of it's over for Cal. He is a guy who thrives on being appreciated and loved, and he probably didn't feel that anymore. He gets a fresh start. And, for Kentucky as a whole, I mean, they were supposed to have 6 incoming freshmen, and, it's hard to build a roster that way. And you kind of felt like you were in for more of the same next year. And now, I think you're going to get a big breath of fresh air with what Mark Pope's going to try to do and how he understands this program. So this will, I think, be beneficial for both sides. We'll see how it works out for the Arkansas side of things, but I definitely think this is going to be a good thing for the University of Kentucky. It was just time. And 15 years is a long time. He did a lot of good things here, but the last 4 or 5 years it hasn't been acceptable, and it was time for a shakeup.
You kind of forget he was there at Kentucky for 15 years. It don't really
Yes.
feel like it's been that long. Kind of a little bit with Alabama with Nick Saban. It didn't really feel like he was there as long as he was, but still, that's a long time to be anywhere. And like you said, sometimes it just gets stale. Just over time, just both sides need a shakeup. Mark Pope, a lot of energy Sunday there in Lexington.
That was unreal.
When he comes, and I really think it was a great idea bringing out the '96 National Championship trophy. Hey, some people look at nostalgia bad. I don't. Play to that nostalgia. You're one of them. That's one thing too with him. He's one of them. He bleeds, blue with Kentucky. Just your thoughts on the hire initially when the news came out to start the weekend, and just kind of like how the weekend played out with him being introduced.
Yeah, obviously the Twitter reaction when it first came down was really negative. I think people were just, and I don't think it was a shot at Mark Pope. And it was, hey, we went from thinking it was going to be Scott Drew. I never really thought it would be Dan Hurley, but he was definitely offered the job at least, or Billy Donovan, and people were excited for those. And then when it was, they go down to the second tier, so to speak, it was like a big shock. And then I think everyone started to look at what he did at BYU last year and really during his tenure there. I mean, the first year at BYU, they were going to be a tournament team. They finished, I think, 13 in the Ken Pom. Obviously, COVID ended that season early, but they were off. He had a great start and had another good year the year after that. Hit a little bit of a roadblock, but then this past year, man, in the Big 12, I still think it was probably the best basketball conference this year. I think now I don't even know if there'll be that big of a drop off for basketball side of things there, but he goes into Allen Fieldhouse and wins. He beats Baylor, he beats Iowa State, and they made noise in the Big 12 in their first year there, and obviously flamed out unfortunately in the NCAA tournament, but still a really, really good year at a place that's really hard to recruit with some of the restrictions you have at Boise State and some of the things that their players have to sign up and commit to if they want to go there, just with the religious aspect of it. So he did a lot with a little at BYU. And then, like you said, he's one of Kentucky's. This guy understands, as he put it so many different times yesterday, understands the assignment and what comes with being at Kentucky. He understands there's no tempering expectations. The fan base wants to win. And what I thought he did yesterday, which is, I think, obviously the energy was unbelievable. I mean, a sold out, they didn't charge anyone, but Rupp Arena was full to the rafters. I've been at Kentucky for 7 years covering this team, and I've never seen, and it's my alma mater too, I've just never seen an environment like what I saw yesterday for that press conference. It was unbelievable. And I thought did a really good job of, other than the energy and playing off that, and after the word, signing some autographs, really showing the fan base he cares, is he kind of he hit all the things that have been a concern the last 4 years with Calipari and what the fan base was kind of agitated about. I mean, he talked about prioritizing winning it. Cal would always say he doesn't care about the SEC's tournament. He hit on that, bringing in staff members like a general manager, an NIL expert, not just relying on one and dones, going to Maui and playing in that again, having some fun, non-conference games, like if they were to welcome Rick Pitino and St. John's back in here, playing zone defense, he took the time to the media stuff, even he would not. Cal stopped doing pregame press conferences. He's done 4 in the last 3 years, and he was speaking with us afterwards and getting to know us a little bit. He was the anti-Cal in every aspect of it, and he just proved again and again how much he understands this place and what the fans are looking for. And I think that is a huge aspect of being here. And now that he's going to be able to recruit, obviously, not just with NIL and with the money that's now going to be at his disposal, but with the Kentucky brand, with the offense he runs, which is a 5-out, really, really, I think, exciting product of offense. And the energy that was at a press conference, imagine what it's going to be for a big game like when Arkansas comes in here next year. So I think there's going to be a lot of tools at his disposal that, combined with what he understands, combined with his understanding of what has to be done at Kentucky, the expectations from the fan base, what the fan base is looking for, I think this has a chance to be a home run. Is it risky with the fact that he's never won an NCAA tournament game, but never coached outside or been a head coach outside the state of Utah? Sure. sure, it's risky. But if you're going to hire anyone with that resume, it's got to be a guy who's played here and understands it and has had at least some head coaching success. And this guy checks the boxes. So, the more you break it down after the initial wave of anger and confusion, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. And I think it has a chance to be a really, really good hire.
Yeah, and connections. Obviously, that's a big part. He has a certain connection to a player that, as we're recording this, has not said he's going to the NBA. Any shot you think Reed Sheppard returns?
I would characterize it as unlikely, just because it's so hard to turn down, being a top 10 pick and the guarantees and the money that comes back with it. I think Rex Chapman said it really, really well after they did a lot of former players talked with us after the press conference yesterday. And he said it best, like, you're one bad turn away from never playing again. And you got to kind of do what you got to do. So I think that part makes it difficult. But like you said, Jeff Sheppard, Reed's dad, and Mark were teammates on the 96 team. Not only were they teammates, they were roommates for 2 years. So they're really, really close. Reed Sheppard is born and raised here, born and raised a Kentucky fan. He loves this place. This fan base loves him. I mean, Mark Pope uses the word Shepherds as in a leader a lot, and he slipped up and said it, and the crowd just started going nuts. And he wasn't even trying to talk about the Sheppard family or Reed. So they love Reed Sheppard here, and it's going to make it a little bit of a harder decision. I'd characterize it as unlikely, but if they were to get him back, man, that would be that'd be the heck of a start for Mark Pope. And not to mention, like we were talking about with the 5-out offense and all the threes they take, he's a perfect scheme fit too. So it definitely makes it a little more interesting, I think, than it would have if Calipari was still here or if someone else had got hired. But I'd still characterize it as unlikely.
I think Calipari would be telling him to go to the NBA.
He definitely would. I agree with that.
So now you got Coach Pope saying, stay one more year.
Yeah, one more year.
So it's all kind of different philosophies between him and Calipari. Let's talk football. And I know Coach Stoops has broken up that Calipari is no longer there. I know they were the best of friends at all times. And obviously people didn't get to see the spring game. Like I told you off air, I thought for sure all these games are streamed on the SEC Network Plus. So Sunday night, in preparation for our conversation on the football side, I said, let me watch Kentucky Spring. I'm looking, I know it's here. I said, then I looked through, said, okay, it was not streamed. A lot of guys out. 9 defensive linemen were out for Kentucky, not participate. They had some defense back to both safeties, Zion Childress and Jordan Lovett, also 2 players that weren't not participating. But just what stood out to you, Kentucky Spring game?
Yeah, so the plan was for it to be, streamed like normal, but the injuries and not tackling to the ground, I think they were able to move some things around and take – I don't know exactly how it worked out that way, but, they obviously didn't make it a televised event and just did a simulated 11-on-11 scrimmage where it was actually pretty, we got to see a lot. I think you got to see Bush Handman and his offense and how they're definitely going to be a lot quicker with the tempo. I thought Brock Vandegrift, new starting quarterback, transferred from Georgia, played really well. The ball barely hit the ground. Bo Allen, the backup quarterback, who's back here after spending a year at Tarleton State and Georgia Southern last year. He comes back. He's the backup. I thought he had a great day. Dane Key, played really well. The running backs looked, from what you could tell, I liked some of the cuts they made. You couldn't really get a full feel of the broken tackles because they weren't tackling. So there was some good stuff there. But the fact they were able to simulate 11-on-11 as well as possible without tackling to the ground, I think let us see a lot. And I think it also, like, the fact they showed a little bit, I think it was kind of convenient for Stoops to pull it off air. And he even admitted afterwards, like, we don't want, you want to be vanilla. You don't want teams to be able to pull tape and see anything in preparation during the season. So they kept it as bland as they could, but they also mixed in the tempo, and we were able to see some good things from some different guys. But, the defensive line is very much banged up. They expect to get most of those guys back by spring camp, like for fall camp, rather. I know, obviously, Deion Walker, who's, for my money, the best player on the roster, probably the best interior defensive tackle in the country going into the season. He had just an offseason cleanup in his shoulder. He'll be fine. you mentioned Jordan Lovett and Zion Childers. I think those guys are fine too. Jamori Macklin, the wide receiver from North Texas, is also fine. So, definitely banged up and some limited bodies, but it allowed some young guys to step up and make some plays. And, like I said, you got to see, I think, a pretty decent amount and a pretty good feel of what, you might see with the pace and certain players on the roster. So it was good from that aspect.
You talked a little bit on the offensive coordinator Butch Hamden, of course, coming from Boise State. And you talk about they're faster, but outside of that, just what you're able to see, and throughout spring practice, in the game on Saturday, how else will this team offensively think look different than what they did under Liam Cohen?
I think you're going to see the QB run game a lot more. One thing that was very interesting is Brock Vandegrift. It's been that type of week here.
Mm-hmm.
But Brock Vandegrift was he was definitely tucking it in and running quite a bit. They definitely were okay letting him run and make plays with his legs. And he has a really good feel, I think, for when he needs to tuck it and run. He has a good feel for cuts and all that. And I think, 2022 with Rich Scangarillo, he really wanted to protect Will Levis going into his draft year. He kind of took took the keys away from the car, so to speak, when it came to running. Because if you remember in 2021, Will Levis was arguably the best mobile quarterback in the SEC. He ran 375 yards. He's leaping over people, but they really, really wanted to protect him. And then last year, you get a guy in Devin Leary who's just not mobile. So you couldn't really, you had a couple scramble plays here and there. I think he had a 15-yard touchdown run against Mizzou, but he just wasn't much of a runner, where I think Brock Vandegrift has that in his bag. And it gives him another element to his game. And you even saw it with some of the reserves as well. So I think that's something that you'll see more of. I definitely think they're going to run the ball. I'm not going to say a lot more because they've been pretty balanced, and the running game's always a staple at Kentucky. But Boise State finished 6th in the country in rushing offense last year. Every year that Hamden's been a coordinator, whether that's been at Washington, a couple games at Missouri at the end of the 2022 season. He's always had an 1,000-yard rusher. He's always run the quarterbacks. So they're going to be creative in the run game. They're going to, still, they have so many weapons on the outside. If they can get it to those guys, they're still going to throw the ball quite a bit. But I definitely think you'll see a more fast-paced offense with some more creativity in the run game. So I think it's an exciting idea, but with what we've seen with the offense last 2 years, you kind of got to see how it goes once we start. Fall camp and then get into the season in August.
And obviously everybody remembers, what Will Levis did at Kentucky, especially the first year that he was starter.
Yes.
Super talented. And look, the reason why he was projected at that time a first-round pick, and he went in the second round. And then Devin Leary is a solid quarterback. But you really, I feel like, just from a pure talent standpoint, Brock Vandegrift is the best quarterback from a talent standpoint that Stoops has had.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's between him and Levis. I think the other thing with Leary that didn't work out last year was, he came from a spread offense, not even hurry up, just tempo. Like it was more similar, not quite as fast as Tennessee or Ole Miss, but with Tim Beck at NC State, it was a very fast-paced offense. And he's coming into a pro-style offense, and he just didn't adapt very well to it. And that was part of the issue with last year's offense. So, and then from a talent perspective, yeah, I agree. Brock Vandegrift, obviously, we all know he was a high 5-star guy in his class. I think a couple of the guys who's behind were like Caleb Williams and Quinn Ewers, so some Drake May, some really, really good quarterbacks in that class. So, and the other thing with him too, I think the coaching and the experience he got at Georgia is big. I mean, he was around the winningest program there is right now in college football and got to learn from Seston Bennett, got to play under Kirby Smart and Todd Monken and last year with Mike Bobo. Some really good coaching, some really good players to learn from, which I think will benefit him a lot. And I think he's brought that to Kentucky, and there's been a sense of him being maybe a step ahead of everyone just because of the things he's picked up and all the processing and coaching he's gotten there at Georgia. And I think it'll be the same on the defensive side of the ball with Jamin Tumas-Johnson. So whenever you're able to tap into a program like that and get a guy who's that well coached with that amount of talent, I think it has a pretty good chance of working out.
Yeah, he's been around winning, so he's been
That's
around
for
that
damn sure.
winning culture.
Yep.
It's not like some quarterbacks come in, or maybe the team wasn't good, or he has sour grapes, or just was
Right.
not much success. Like you said, a lot with these transfer quarterbacks. This is completely. It just the Georgia quarterback room just was too crowded. So somebody
Exactly.
had,
Someone had to go, and it
yeah,
wasn't going to be Carson Beck.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. And we do not need to touch on baseball because the Auburn fans down here in Dothan may not want to hear about Kentucky. Auburn baseball is just not good this year. So
Yeah.
we don't need to talk about that one. But I appreciate you coming on to all things Kentucky. But like I said at the top of our conversation, a lot of interesting stuff going around Kentucky athletics right now. Like you said, basketball's new head coach. Football closing up spring practice, and the baseball team's playing great too. But
Yep.
if the listeners, viewers want to check online and find out more about the Wildcats, where can they find you?
Yep, A Gershon 99 at Twitter, X, whatever the hell it is nowadays. Then CatsPause.com, 247 affiliate, locally CatsPause magazine, bi-weekly during the season, every 6 weeks in the off season, and then the football and basketball yearbooks. So, and then Bleav in Kentucky podcast every Wednesday night live, YouTube, X, all social media. So that is where to find me.
All right, sounds good, Aaron. Appreciate the time, and I hope we can do some sometime down the road.
Anytime, man.